Diolch, Llywydd. Now, prisoner voting is, I think, an important issue. I do have slight concerns about us bringing this debate today because, as John Griffiths has just explained, there is an ongoing inquiry into this issue being carried out by the ELGC committee, of which I am a member. I think, in general, it isn't good practice to preempt the outcome of an inquiry. But to be fair, we had a debate on various criminal justice issues in the Chamber a couple of weeks ago, which wasn't brought by us, in which both Labour and Plaid Cymru certainly sent out strong signals on this issue. So I think that debate has already preempted the inquiry to some extent. To recap what was said a fortnight ago, Labour's Jane Hutt stated that the Welsh Government was awaiting the outcome of our inquiry, but at the same time was preparing a government bill on this issue. Well, a bill is a major undertaking, and you don't prepare a bill if you're not seriously intending to bring legislation in. So I think this tells us that the Welsh Government has already decided that it will extend prisoner voting, although they are not explicitly stating that, despite the fact that we haven't finished the committee inquiry yet. For their part, Plaid Cymru, who brought the debate, were keen to include prisoner voting in the wording of their motion. This gave us, I think, a strong indication that they wish to extend the prisoner voting franchise in Wales. So again, I think this preempts the inquiry, certainly in spirit, if not in precise wording. So I think we are justified in bringing this debate today. Of course, I will endeavour to continue to listen to the evidence on of the committee inquiry. Now, my colleague Neil Hamilton has raised some of the major moral objections to allowing prisoner voting at all, which is basically the UKIP position, that far from wanting to extend the prisoner vote, we would rather ignore the absurd ruling of the European Court of Human Rights on this and allow no prisoner voting at all. If the major objection to this is that we need to comply with the ECHR, then our position is this. We are leaving the EU and the ECJ in order to have control over our own laws. After all, that is what the majority of the people of the UK voted for. So why don't we simply leave the ECHR as well and have our own British Bill of Rights? So this is the political context in which we oppose the principle of prisoners having the right to vote. Now, what our inquiry has already thrown up so far are the many logistical and technical difficulties that are likely to arise if you do go down the path of trying to extend the prisoner franchise. There are major difficulties, for example, over the registered address of prisoners. There are prisoners with Welsh addresses who are imprisoned in English prisons. So some prisoners held in English prisons could be allowed to vote in a Welsh Assembly election. That will be difficult to organise. Even if they have that vote in theory, will they actually be able to cast their vote in practice? Conversely, there are English prisoners in Welsh prisons who won't be allowed to vote in an Assembly election. Yes?
Is he aware that prisoners already exercise their right to vote? They tend to vote by post or proxy.
The right to vote, as far as I recall from our inquiry in Wales, was actually extended by that ECHR ruling and the application
prisoners
of it
on remand.
to prisoners on remand. Okay, that is a precise issue.
They're not convicted.
But they're still in prison, aren't they?
I think there is a basic difficulty with prisoners on remand, but it's an interesting point that we need to look at. Now, if I can return to what I was saying, conversely, there are English prisoners in Welsh prisons who won't be allowed to vote in an Assembly election. So in many prisons, you will get prisoners on the same wing, some of whom will get a vote and others of whom will not. What you won't get is equality of opportunity, and the inequality may conceivably lead to a lower morale on the wing rather than a higher morale. So I think we do need to tread carefully here. We did visit Park Prison, as John Griffiths mentioned. We did meet prisoners, we met prison officers, and we met the prison director. Now, they do have a privileges system on that prison. I wondered, would the privileges system be of any use in determining whether or not a prisoner might be allowed to vote? Perhaps a naive idea. The prison director thought this was highly impractical, and on reflection, I think this would be unlikely, given that you are then giving the prison director and the prison officers a right to say who can and who can't vote, which is probably itself fundamentally undemocratic. So, given all these difficulties, we are then led into the extremely murky waters of allowing all prisoners to vote. I really do think I agree with points that Mark Isherwood raised during the previous Chamber debate, that the prospect of violent offenders like murderers and rapists getting the vote is not likely to win much support from the wider electorate. And he did quote again today the 9% figure from a YouGov survey conducted in 2017. So I think there will be very little public support for this. It wasn't in Labour or Plaid Cymru's manifesto. I think it's a bit rich trying to bring this under the radar. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Alan Davis.